we are doing a sort of review of net art history, although it's anti-history, and we want to do it more like anti-Eurocentrism, although it's really difficult. And so we are both agree on both argument that uh, we want to present different ideas on net art with different definition in different regions. So to make a kind of history that is anti-history, although it is rather difficult, but we are still trying to do our best to make it like a more diverse discussions. And also we want to focus on this idea that there's no one single origin of net art, because there is this myth of the origin of net art is from Slovenia, and it's because the artist Vukosi got the email and there's some kind of the term net art shows up. But when we had the talk with him, we know that it's actually a myth. But it's really cool that if everyone who has done any preliminary research, this is the first thing that pops up. And it's for us, it's also really this like roller coaster of journey of researching and what is the origin. Although we both agree that it's impossible to have one single origin, but we still need, like a literature or document to form like our position. So at the beginning, we start to research a lot on different region, and we create like a sort of a database on Airtable. If Daniela, you want to explain a little bit what we have done.
Yes, of course. In this aim to work differently from the hegemonic histories of net art, what we did is to put all the information together in this Airtable that we are showing. So we have different categories. One is artists, this one that we're looking at. And so we have separated between the names, the artworks or projects that they have developed, where are they from, and of course we have included the website of these projects. And we have also worked in categorizing and giving other tags like where are they from, what's their gender, what's their topic of interest, etc. Because also we wanted to scope a little bit the gender diversity of this whole discipline in a way. So we have, this was very helpful for us at the beginning because we could find really relevant artists that had helped us to get to know other artists. And this is something that I'm going to explain a little bit more in detail now. So my part, because I am from Argentina and Uruguay, I was very interested in getting to know a little bit how was net art developed here in these places. So we're going to go to the slide that says net art in Latin America, which is below.
This?
No, below. So it's this one. Wait, it's below. It's that one. Yeah. So before going more in detail into this, I have used as a main focus this book, which is if I don't know if you can see it in the screen, is developed by many researchers from Argentina, which is called Argentinian Technopoetics. And it's like an archive, they call it like a soft archive of art and technology. Mm-hmm. So the reference for this will be included in our PowerPoint. So going back to it, and thank you. So as I said, I will address the situation and development of net art mainly in Argentina and Uruguay, and I might include some examples of artists based in other countries of the region. I believe it's important to mention that when we are talking about this region of Latin America, we cannot talk in a way that creates like a generalization or almost generalization of the productions from the whole area. I will give some general context first and then address different examples and mention the country of each case. As the book I showed before is from this researcher, Claudia Kosak, and another group of researchers like Charlie Gradin and Lila Pagola, and they have developed significant research around art and technology practices that they decided to encompass under the term technopoetics. And as you see in our slides, technopoetics are artworks, artistic projects, ideas, people, artistic programs, or poetics that in various ways assume at every moment the technical environment of which they are part of and act accordingly. Art and technology can be understood as regimes of experimentation of the sensible and creative powers. So I think I thought it was relevant to give this more general definition of technopoetics, that it's every art that in a way, as I say, encompasses and explores and dialogues with its technical context. And when we talk about technical context, it's like a very broad, it's not only like computers, etc. It's more open. And so Net.art is considered by this group of researchers as a technopoetic. And although we have already mentioned some definitions of Net.art in the other video that was mainly from Josephine Bosma, I also wanted to share how this group of researchers define this practice. And as you see in the slide, they state that Net.art is an interactive art form and its common support is computers connected to the internet. So now we find a contradiction with the more open definition of Josephine Bosma that we said before, right? Its specificity lies in the need of connectivity to produce exchanges, and this can be established between the artwork and its receptors, between the receptors through the artwork, or in less cases among the artists and receptors in real time. From such interactions, the net artworks arises. So going to the following slide, I will give a little bit of context of the accessibility to internet from the area. So around 1995, the first internet access nodes were installed in certain Latin American cities, primarily at the universities, as well as in these what were called cyber cafes, that were cafes that also had computers with internet access, but they were pretty expensive at the time. So the first Latin American countries to have a significant number of online citizens were Uruguay and Chile. And Chile's internet boom gradually lost momentum in the years leading up to 2000, when it reclaimed a leading position in the region alongside Argentina and Brazil. As we see then, the internet in the region was extensively accessible some years later than in the international movement of Net.art had developed and communicated. Thus, Net.art
in 1980s, like
exactly.
It started. So it's like 10, 20 years later. 10 to 20.
Yeah. Thank you. So I think it's like, yeah, the end of the 80s, right? The end of the beginning of 90s. So yeah. So because of internet was not accessible and widely used at the moment, Net.art in the region was also developed years later than in the international movement. And just as a reference, like the myth that Ocean mentioned from book Kosik, this term arose and the myth relates to something that happened on 1997, to have a reference. So if we consider the characteristics of Net.art in Europe, we have already said that there was a political shift and interest within these artworks. However, as researcher Lila Pagola explains, in the Latin American region, we don't talk so much of a political shift in the content of the net artworks. Let me check. I think we can go to the next slide. Yeah. This shift focused on the debate surrounding interactivity as a category that had a profound effect on the concept of artwork and on the role of the spectator in the reception process. So at the beginning, like the first examples of net artworks that we find in this region, there was not so much this anti-institutional approach, but it was more a way to explore different ways to interact among the artist and the receptor. One of the preoccupation of the artists from that time was the endogamic conditions of the art system. And although in Europe, internet appeared as a tool to work against this and create alternative communication networks, this didn't happen in Latin American region in an extended way, as internet, as I said before, was slow, expensive, and scarce. So there was still a social unfamiliarity with the internet as a tool, and the artists who did have knowledge and had access to internet, they used it more to create online experiments. Another aspect of the arouse of net art in this area is that net artists in this country and in the region never achieved to develop a local community or regional community of artistic practices. In Argentina and Uruguay, contemporary art, net art has had very small presence and scarcely understood compared to the other forms of digital or interactive art, such as interactive installations or software developers oriented to performatic actions, for example. So these other formats of digital or interactive arts were integrated in institutional circuits of galleries, museums, and cultural centers, and net art was less represented. Like there was a much more difficulty to integrate net artworks in the exhibition format. Besides the different technological infrastructure, which I already mentioned, other theories, as Josephine Bosma, state also that Latin America also lacked the necessary powerful social infrastructure, like the one that forms the basis of net art criticism, and that were also like researchers which were important at the moment to create like a history of net art at the moment that was happening. So the research that was done about net art in this region was a little bit after it happened. Other comments on the region which are relevant are from artist Brian Mackern, which is from Uruguay, which I will mention more in detail in a while, and which you can also see more of his work in another talk that we had with him in another video. And he said that Latin American artists worked in isolation. Not only were they isolated from their European and American peers, but also from their peers in Latin America. So he mentions that it was easier to find information about the work of European artists, which were already well known within net art, than to find information of other Latin American artists. So he says that content on the internet does not simply emerge by itself. Someone has to create this connection. Yeah. And Latin American artists were scarcely heard from in online discussions in the 90s, for instance, and were seldom published, referred to, or linked in most active and visible net artwork networks.
I have a question about this. First of all, like you said, there's no this political anti-institutional perspective in Latin America, but creating this community of net artists, I think this is also like a bit of anti-institutional, right? So I'm not sure, maybe I don't have enough context.
No, yeah, of course. What I mean is that, I mean, in Latin America, art and politics has been very strong and has a deep history of these artists, which are also activists and work manage to work no matter the different political context, right? And they raise their voice against the situation. However, when we talk specifically about net art, we cannot, like the net artworks that we find at the beginning, we cannot say that they had like a strong political intent. And this community was not developed as strongly at the beginning. So I'm talking about the first years. So for me, and this is something that I develop now, is that the political statement arrives more when some artists start to create this community. But this was not something that happened from the beginning, like it did happen in the case of Slovenia and other parts of Europe that we had the chance to talk more with Vukovic. So it was mainly that these net artists that had the knowledge of using internet and the access, they were working more isolated, and only after that artworks or archives like the one that Brian developed helped to create this community, and then another collective that I will mention from Argentina. So it's more that in my point of view, like the political statement is in this gesture of putting all the information together, but this was something strictly done by the artists and not with the help of institutions. So there is like a lack of interest from the institutions in order to represent net art in this region as well. Is this clear?
Yes, yes.
Cool. So when I put lack of creation of a regional community, this was at the beginning. So later, some of the artists, they do create these archives that help to collect all the artworks that had been created.
Yeah. Great.
So a lot of net artworks were experiments of artists that, in the same ways as its European counterparts, saw in the web a channel to explore and free, sort of like free from the logics of institutions, right? So now I'm going to shift to, in this last point, I put also that there is like a strong relation with poetry, which is like net poetry, visual poetry, and experimental literature and email art. So I will show some of the examples of this later. And also this anti-design aim, which is something that we can find in almost all net artworks, that there is not this aim to create like super clear and clean websites with a easy user experience.
Not user friendly. You can
not user. Yeah. Okay. So now shifting to the next slide, we're going to talk specifically about the Net.art Latino database, that this is a work and a project done by Brian Mackern, who's an artist from Uruguay. He in this is also an interesting case because he's an artist, but in this piece he also worked as a curator. And this goes back to this discussion that we had at the beginning, or in another video, about what's the role of a curator when we're talking about digital media, right? So in this piece, he did like a cartography of net art projects from Latin America artists from the 2000 until 2005. This archive is still online, and they have also created a book from this with the support, financial support of MEIAC, which is a museum based in Spain. It is important, it's a very important project as well, because it also had the aim to communicate in Spanish and in Portuguese the work of these artists, because we don't have to forget that the main language which was used in Net.art was English, because that was the language of the internet, right? So Brian Mackern's work also had this possibility to show the works in Spanish and in Portuguese, and it was also like a way to promote these works. The countries which are included in the database are Argentina, Chile, Cuba, Uruguay, Venezuela, Peru, Ecuador, El Salvador, Colombia, Brazil, Mexico, y Puerto Rico. And it's very funny that when we start to research more about how people has talked about this database, there is like a nostalgic tone about it, because many of the links are not working anymore. So there are multiple, when you open, I think that more than half of the links, you will find this message of 404 not found. But when we read Josephine Bosma's, for example, comments on this situation, she has this more like nostalgic conception of these laws, and of course it is an aspect that shows this scarce institutional interest for the conservation of net art in this region, and of course the lack of resources for the artists to do it individually. However, if we continue reading about this, and in the book that was published about this project, there's a very interesting text about from the artist Gustavo Romano, that he's from Argentina, that I will show another piece from him. He says that in the fact that we find that many of the artworks are not working anymore, of the links are not working anymore, we can see and assume the ephemeral condition of net art. So in the next slide, I have included a quote that is from Brian Mackern, that it's for me it's very relevant, and it shares more the spirit in which they consider net arts. And I read now: "For we must not forget that the internet is a dynamic system where things are and cease to be just as street signs and buildings, facades, colors change from day to day. For this reason, we cannot ignore that we are now witnessing an impossible attempt to pin down the movements of an era whose only survivors are those who resist giving up what they once were. Internet users must take it as they find it and excuse the broken links they discover along the way, as well as the ones that have been revived with an exuberance they never had in the past, thanks to the continuous efforts of a few artists and collectives who operate with a total disregard for the centers of dissemination and legitimation that preach their sermons further to the north." So this is like a very strong statement from Brian Mackern and Nilo Casares, who was the curator that helped him to create this book. But I think it's very interesting because it gives a totally different perspective on the importance of conservation of net art. And it also talks about the sort of the impossibility of conserving a type of artwork that needs of a specific browser and a specific device that becomes obsolete some years after, right? Some other important aspect, of course, is that for this he uses the ASCII aesthetic in the database, and maybe I can share my computer, my screen now.
Okay, you can share.
Oh, wait. I need your permission.
Okay.
Great. So now I want to share with you just the experience of scrolling through the database that I have been talking about. So this is when you log into the website, to this database, what the first thing you encounter is this this drawing made through ASCII, which is actually, it resembles the South American map and central part of Central America as well, put upside down, that it's it resembles an artwork from Uruguayan artist Joaquin Torres Garcia. So you can press and you can go to any country. So for example, Uruguay. And if we press, then we see you cannot find the content. This one, it's working. This is Brian Mackern's artwork. Then another one, it's not working. And it's like, this is mainly the experience. And there's no, I mean, there have been some restorations and conservations about from some of the pieces, but most of them are not working anymore. Look, this is working. Or some of them are links which take you to other things.
You are still in the same like homepage. Is that correct? Or you connect?
No. Wait, sorry. Maybe I know. Sorry. I was opening. Wait. Do you see now?
Yes.
Sorry. So I'm hearing then, and now we go back to this is then, you see the Net.art or not Net.art, right? Then we press. Do you see this one, which is not working, right?
Yes.
Cool. This is another one which works. So just wanted to share a little bit like the experience of like this thing that it's regarded as somehow nostalgic because of the great loss, but for me it's also relevant to think about, considering that it is a kind of artwork which also wants to be ephemeral. So some other examples, and which I wanted to, apart from this this big work that Brian Mackern did in Argentina, we find a collective which was called Fin del Mundo, which is end of the world. It means end of the world. And this group they were working from 1995 until 2009. It's actually artists that had like their individual artwork, but they used this website in order to put together all their productions of Net.art. So I will share again my screen. This is Fin del Mundo, which means end of the world. And here we can go to see the projects. This is like the list of the different projects that are here from, it's Gustavo Romano, Jorge Haro, Belén Gache, and Carlos Trilnik. So I will show the examples of this artwork that is called My Desire is Your Desire from 1996-1997, which is this one. Which this was about what this artist did is generating two faces that were generated by computers of people who actually, of course, never existed. And he put their photographic portraits into personal internet pages, and he also included the emails of these fake people, right? And people could actually send them emails. So if I go to the website of the woman, for example, it says, my desire is your desire. I want you to want me. I want to see myself in your eyes. My dream is what you dream me. Is that you dream me? So she includes her email. And now later, the artist has included all the messages that this person received. We're talking about 96, where this kind of ways of relating, or what now we call dating apps, did happen through email. So some of the examples that of the emails that she received was, "Come live with me and be my love, and we will some new pleasures prove," etc., etc. So he has included all the emails that this fake person actually received. Some people were giving their addresses. Will you prove your worth? And he's sending all these emails. And the same was for the case of the guy who received less emails, as we see. And people was actually giving their emails to receive an answer. So another example that I wanted to share is this from this artist called Belén Gache. This is one of the examples of more like experimental literature, and it's a very small and website, and she's mainly a writer, so she used a net artwork to do this like experimental literature. So this artwork is called Vampire Woman Invade Colonia del Sacramento, which is a city in Uruguay. So if you enter, and you press the moon, you can choose these 3 different names, and you start to receive to read this text. I dream the night based my magnolia skin. So it's very sort of like literature and poetic. And I don't know if you're able to also listen, but there is some tones. And if you press another word, you can continue finding out what happens in the story. So another example, which is from also an Argentinian artist, which is called Leonardo Solaas, is this one, Dreamlines 2.0. This artwork works in the way that it's like an interactive visual experience, and you enter one or more words that define the subject of the dream that you wish to dream. The system searches the web for images related to these words and takes them as input to generate an ambiguous painting in perpetual change, where the elements are fused in a process analogous to memory and free association. So I am here in the website, in the artwork, and I press, for example, I don't know, cloud. So now the website is creating the image of my dream related to this word. And it's in constant change. This is an example that I like a lot because it's much more contemplative and it doesn't allow any other interaction more than the fact that I put some words to start this image. And you can continue. It's super slow, and I find it very sort of hypnotic. It's nice. Finally, an example from Mexico, which has a pretty different tone, is this artwork that it's called Mejor Vida Corp, which means Better Life Corp. So this is a net artwork which has a much more activist perspective. And Better Life Corp works more like a non-profit corporation that creates, promotes, and distributes products and services for free. Besides, they can be delivered anywhere in the world without charge. Among a variety of goods, Better Life Corp provides subway tickets, safety pills, cheaper barcode stickers, self-stamped envelopes, lottery cards, student identity cards, or services like cleaning service, recommendation letters, etc. So it's really, if you go to the website, you press products and you can choose subway tickets from Mexico City, safety pills, students' ID cards. So you can choose what you want and you put your information and you will receive this. This artwork explores and reacts on the general practices of the large corporations and institutions, analyzing every particular context, like Mexico, the city of Mexico, Toronto, Hasselt, Frankfurt, etc. So I found this example interesting because it gives another tone in relation to the other ones, which were more like related to literature, like visual poetry or contemplation. This has a more, it's also related to what it's called like participatory art and useful art. Also, when I approached this artwork, we arrived to another thing, and I think that it's an important aspect from Net.art, which is this strangeness that they create, which is like, is this true? Is this actually happening? Like, am I going to receive these products that I order? And this is something that I haven't found enough research to see if it's true or not, what they do in this Better Life Corp. But I know that it's like a very long-term project that has been working for long. So I think this is another aspect which is important from Net.art, that is this level of strangeness, and that you don't know if it's a fake situation or if it's true. So that was a little bit the part for the general introduction, like the context for Latin America. I wonder, Xianyun, if you have any question about it.
Yeah, I'm wondering about this, why the definition of Net.art in Latin America is techno poetry. I mean, because I don't know the full picture, and you just showed one example of more like a poetry artwork, and I'm just wondering the whole context.
Yeah, it's not techno poetry, it's techno poetics. So when we talk about poetics, like at least more in Spanish, it's more like any type of aesthetic or art discipline.
General idea of.
Yeah, exactly.
Almost every art has poetic elements.
Exactly. So it's like any art practice that includes a reference, like it can be like political, critical, or not, any reference, and interacts with its technical surrounding. But I think that this, including this for me, was important, because when we talk about technical surrounding, it allows us to be more to talk more in depth about what is the devices that we're talking about, right?
Yeah, I'm also wondering, like, all this artwork you just showed, they are like done by one person, or they are done by a collective?
Yeah, so all of them, they are done by one person. Like the case of Brian Mackern's database is very important, because he did like an extensive archiving work just by himself. Mm-hmm. Then of course, all the part of transforming that into a book was a work with a curator. And of course, it was all with the collaboration of all the community of artists that were also providing him the information. he said that he got to know all this through email lists and information that he received by colleagues, right? Then Fin del Mundo, it's a collective, but they all work individually. So the artworks that I show that it's from like the Vampire Woman, it's by only one artist. And the ones of the Dreams is only an individual artist. And the last one from Mexico, it's also, it's an individual artist, and her name is Minerva, sorry, I cannot remember her name totally, but I will put it in the presentation. But it's also an individual work.
Also, you mentioned that the technological arrival, the internet arrived a little bit later in Latin America, and also in general, they're like sort of Latin America's label is more like low tech a bit. I mean, compared to Taiwan or Slovenia. And I'm wondering if you have any thought on how these influence the artworks or the general scene in the net art culture.
Of course, this is something that I didn't want to extend on now, because we're going to have another whole talk specifically about low tech, but it's very important that we mention this. Like, when we talk about art and technology in Latin America, always one of the characteristics is that we're dealing with low tech, right? What is low tech? It's like cheaper technology, it's technology that we are reusing, it's the domestic technology, etc. And an important aspect of this, and I say this from what I have read and listened from many of the artists that are working with this, is that it's not that we're using low tech to go because we want to go against high tech, or we want to in a way like clean up our use of high tech. It's because low tech is what is mainly available. I mean, we are consumers of computers, cell phones, etc., which are of course high technology, but what is mainly available for artists is low technology. And there's also a very important and strong statement on reusing these devices and going against the obsolescence period. But I feel also that this appears in net art, for example, in the aesthetic that Brian Mackern uses of ASCII. Mm-hmm. So ASCII could be, is considered a low technology. Yeah. And when we see his book, the book of this database, it is also done in a format of low technology. We haven't got the book, sadly, but we can show some images later that it's done in very thin paper, and in paper from like the printers that we used to use in the 90s. So this aspect that we were talking about, ephemeral, and this fragility of the medium, is also present when we are talking about low technology. And so we can of course make this parallel between low technology when we're working with devices like toys, etc., and the fact that most of the links of net art are not working anymore. And of course their aesthetic, I mean, if we go back to see, apart from Dreamlines, the artwork from the Dreams, which has more like a more contemporary view, most of the other ones have this very anti-design or more like 90s look of the internet. 90s, 2000s.
Okay, hello. I will present net art in Taiwan in this part. And in compared to Latin America, the internet already arrived in Taiwan in the 80s, and the internet has become more widespread in the 90s already. And there are 4 net artists I identify here. Actually, they started to do net art like almost at the beginning of when the net art has become more widespread. So you can see from 1997 till now, there are these 4 Taiwanese artists. Wang Jingjie and Huang Wenhao, they are based in Taiwan, and Zheng Shuli and Lee Mingwei, they are Taiwanese artists but based in the US. And this is also quite common in Taiwan, that lots of artists, they actually had a career like first in the international scene, and especially in the USA and in Europe. And now I'm going to present more in details about the artworks of Zheng Shuli in 1998.
Xian Yun, sorry, can I just tell you that for some names and words in Taiwanese, maybe it's also helpful if you show with the what are you referring, which are you referring to, because it makes it more clear.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
So this is Wang Jingjie, Zheng Shuli, Huang Wenhao, and Lee Mingwei. Yeah. And Zheng Shuli's Brandon was one of the earliest Net.art in the history even. And it was commissioned by Guggenheim in 1998. And it was the first artist project commissioned for the World Wide Web, exploring the issue of gender identity and technobody in cyberspace. And I'm going to show you this website now. Yeah, you can search, it's still public. So everyone can search Brandon and then you can find this artwork. And this is like an interactive website that create a kind of American road trip. Okay, afterwards, when you press something, you will go inside to the road trip. The work is inspired by a tragic story of a person called Brendan. And Brendan is a transgender who was raped and murdered after being discovered that he had the male body. And the project narrative is non-linear and the process is participatory, not only for the user, but also the whole process of production is a more open format. Okay, now I will go to the, when you press somewhere, okay, it will go to this road trip. And you can like click stuff on the way, and then it will go out to other hyperlinks, and it has lots of pop-up thing. Detour. Your skin gets sicker, heart forget you, my chest, and you can read. And there are also more like hyperlinks that you can call, and also you can type in stuff, and there are more things that will pop up. So you can see this is kind of not the really usual way even nowadays when we use internet. It is like more non-linear, not so user-friendly, but you really feel like you go into a journey. And it's also similar to our experience recently, that you always have other links to pop up and go. So here is this idea of the website, and I'm going back to the PowerPoint. So what was really important about this website and why we really have to consider it as net is because this is a quote from the official website of Guggenheim, that they were described it like Brandon was not only a website, but for 1 year also served as a social and academic space through which a broad audience communicated both casually and as participant in a number of organized events. So it was not only an online website, but also they form lots of physical gatherings and really form a network. So I think the core of the Net.art, one thing is about building a network and creating a more open space, because internet can be a tool to create an open space, sort of a bit more easy than before. But the physical events, if you have some mechanism that can make it open, it is also good that you have both. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that it's super important, two facts. First, that in comparison to what we saw more in relation to Latin America, is that from the beginning, this artwork and this project was supported by institutions. So, and that's very early in comparison to other aspects that we experiences that we saw, and also that, as you said, because of the topic, it is about like gender issues and violence and discrimination about to transgender. I think it's really important that it also help as a initiative to create a community and to get in touch with other people who might be having the same issues or having the same interests. So it's a very, I think it's a very good example of how an artwork that is initially on the net can also create a community outside. So it's this helping us also to go against this binary of in real life or in the IRL or URL, right? Like online, offline.
Okay. Okay, so the other artist I'm going to present is this Lee Mingwei's Malepregnancy project. Okay, this is a website that he made that time. So this really looks like a hospital website, like a real hospital website. And this is the artist himself, and they make a fake Time magazine cover. Also, there are like interview and FAQ question from the doctor and scientists and physician. And also this like message common boards. And there's also this fake documentary. It's like walking on the streets.
Set the exact date for this is that this child would grow within the uterus of a female. You can see.
So it has this like fake hospital setting lecture and like realistic street interview stuff, and also like lots of news and Time magazine cover, CNN cover. So this is, I think, really cool that the artist Lee Mingwei, but in Chinese is Lee Mingwei, that I quote from our critic that this website creates biomedical realism, where the techniques, modes, and even instruments of biomedicine are actually mobilized to create an aura of credibility that male pregnancy is in fact real. And I find this artwork like really interesting because it was at the start when we start to have internet and website, and you are still really forming a kind of credibility on website, because nowadays the first thing you encounter a new person or new project, it's like you will Google him or her, and this visual style sort of become part of us now. But this was happening in 1997, and you already start aware of this whole institution, how an institution constructed on a website. And also this critic, he or she, I'm not sure, that argued that this project is also an empathic renaissance with the material relation he has encountered in his own life. It is not the physical or corporal simulation of pregnancy, but it's rather a social relations. It acts that enable others to encounter the structural limits and potentialities of self-other relations. So I think this perspective or this way of interpretation is really cool, because if you look this Net.art work literally, it's about the way simulation of pregnancy. But if you look deeper, it's actually like exploring the relation between self and other, and how male body can embody another, that is a female body. So this thing that is actually created through the credibility of an institution and how other people respond to this idea. Yeah. And so then I'm so interested in Lee Mingwei's other work, that actually I find it really interesting that this year in 2020, he had an exhibition called Sonic Blossom, an invitation for dawn. This is like the most, I think, recent net project that he did. So this work, you can see the website. That is a solo exhibition, and the work is a live artwork, Sonic Blossom, which tests the possibility of giving and receiving something as immaterial and intimate as some, instead of meeting in the exhibition space. So Invitation for Dawn will virtually bring together classical trained opera singers and members for the public. In one-on-one setting, the singers will perform a song and give to their guests. So in the exhibition space, it's like this setting. And in the online base, it's like you can register and then you get a Zoom link, and then the performer will perform for you. And it's really intimate because it's a one-on-one like Zoom meeting with one person sing a song for you. So this is just project by Invitation for Dawn that he did this year. So let's go back to the PowerPoint. And I quote that Lee Mingwei, the artist, said, "I see my works also in this way, sharing the gift of song, the gift of contemplation, or the gift of exchange with a stranger." And I think this is really much related to Net.art in the sense that you exchange things with a stranger. And I think, and I dig into his earlier work, like the dining project is, you can register to have a private dining with Lee Mingwei in a museum space. And the moving garden is, he put lots of flowers in the exhibition space, and the audience can take one, and then they have to, or they are encouraged to give this flower to a stranger that they meet afterward. So he wants to make this artwork like, you know, when strangers meet, when the serenity occurs. And I think these 4 artworks, they are actually all related to Net.art. Even if like the dining project of Moving Garden, you feel like it's an example in a physical space, but it is, I think, in the sense that they are a kind of way that people exchange something with a stranger in a private space, or you use art as a tool or as a stimulation to open a space for a discussion. And lots of art critics consider like a dining project of Moving Garden in the discourse of relational aesthetics. But I think also in Bosma, the Net.art theories, she argues that she kind of exclude relational aesthetic outside Net.art, but I think actually there are lots of similar common grounds. So I think in a sense of building a network with stranger and construct a credential environment, and how to build a trust system in the internet culture has shifted from a museum or a physical institution, but to like a new form, like this participatory art or in online format. So I think in a more abstract sense, it shares some common thinking process between Net.art and all this seemingly like seemingly physical stuff project that he did. So I find it really interesting that one of his earliest work is like strictly website art, but then gradually turned to this network art. But I think all of them share this idea that actually online offline maybe is not that difficult at the same time. Yeah, or you want to add something?
No, yeah, I would. Yeah, I think that it's an excellent example of going again to this possibility of meeting on the website and having and creating these experiences and platforms for encounters that happen on the network, on the internet, but also outside. I think that, as you said, yes, Bosma excludes relational aesthetics because it's a very like a specific concept, but it's also it could be very related to what Claire Bishop also develops as participatory art, but in a more like intimate way. And I think that this example that you showed, the sonic block, sorry, it's like invitation for dawn. Yeah, that one, it's also a very good example for us, for this project and for the way that we had to work in, because it allows to have the in real life meeting, but also the Zoom, the possibility to meet through Zoom, but creating sort of also exploring the possibility to create intimacy within networks and within sort of virtual encounters, which is one of also the key questions that we were having and we were exploring through this project.
Yeah. Okay, I'll go back to the PowerPoint. So yeah, this is the example of the discussion between Net.art and participatory art. And then we are going to look at other example in Taiwan. This article I found in Net.art is really good, that it summarized like the earliest artworks, but because of the links are no longer work, so I couldn't give a first-hand like sort of interpretation. But if you are interested in, there are also Wang Jing's 极乐世界荧光之旅. This website is also like a fake sort of travel agency website, and the other is a web installation called Secret Garden that use lots of different kind of cool animation, but it is a pity that I couldn't find the original link because I think it's not working with nowadays format. But if you are interested, you can dig it more. And now I'm going to introduce some of the institutions that related to Net.art. And most of them are not strictly related to Net.art. Of course, it's more like digital art or new media art in general. So it's Digital Art Center and Taiwan 数位艺术中心 and Digital Art Festival and ETFP. Actually, they're like the same like founder. And also I want to share that there are two really important archive or online platforms that I was thinking if I want to call them Net.art or not, but I think they are more like an archive. The first one is this database of sound and art culture, sound art and sound culture, okay, in Taiwan, that they put lots of history of sound art archive, and the whole website may be considered as a digital curation to some degrees. And what are the difference between an archive and an online exhibitions? I think this is another issue. And I think this website can be considered as both net art and exhibition in some way. There are three ways to explore the website. One is like a linear timeline of sound art culture in Taiwan. And this website put significant cultural events and historical events in parallel with technological development of sound apparatus. And the second way of using the website is through scenes and a list of keywords. The third way is using word cloud and keyword extraction. So like, floating keywords data. So this where resonates more with the impact of digitalization and internet culture. And the other archive about sound is more like a field sound record. And this is like, they put also a Google Map inside, and you have the specific location of where the sound comes from. So this is more like a sound archive database, more like a field research. And these two examples, I think, is quite important because they are exploring different ways of dealing with database. One is like historical timeline and the use of word cloud and keyword extraction. The other is a thoroughly field records plus Google Map technique. And this makes me like think of two questions that is what is the relationship between museum and archive? Yeah. And also I'm thinking of the one like Daniela did research about the Latino database, and it's partly also related to sound art culture, right?
And yeah, I mean, the question that you referred to at the beginning, the first one in relation to their archive and museums, and I think it's a question that also expands into museums and conservation, right?
Mm.
And when the one of sound art, the Latino database, Brian Mackern has done a lot of artwork, sound art works, but in the Latino database, it's not only sound art that you found. I'm not sure if that was your question.
Yeah, I'm just curious about like the way they deal with the narrative that they deal with the archive. Because the two example I just gave, one is like geographically, the other is like using linear timeline and plus this new form like word cloud and keyword extractions.
Yeah, well, in a way, the Latino database has this part of organizing the works through their location. And so this is also a question of, do we, and this is a very expanded question in Latin America, like, do we need to present an artwork or define an artwork because of where it comes from or because of where it's located? And this is a very complex issue that we already sort of discussed in terms of accessibility, what's the technology available, et cetera, et cetera. And the other issue that we can talk about through the Latino database is that the archive is more considered as at the beginning with the work that Brian Mackern was doing, an archive, making a collection, and also creating this index, but also allowing the archive to be alive. And if we say that it is alive, it also means that it will die at a point. So all these links that are not working anymore, and because of the issues that we already discussed, the lack of finance and the lack of interest from institutions, but it also talks about the fact that an archive can change, and Net.art can change. And Net.art, one aspect of Net.art is that the links will work and then stop working at a time. So I think that aspect is interesting also to consider, the ephemeral aspect of Net.art, and that will also include or affect how we create an archive of Net.art.
Yeah.
This we have discussed more extendedly in the conversation, the talk of Brian Mackern, when he also talks about some artwork from Argentinian artist Mariela Yeregui that he restored with the finance support of Rhizome. So this is an aspect that can already also be discussed within that video.
Yeah, so I think now we have lots of terms, like exhibition in a museum, online archive, digital curation, online exhibition, and all this, and also Net.art. And now I think after all this research, I'm thinking actually, is it even meaningful to make a term called digital curation or online exhibition? Because this is like using the traditional format to describe a new whole medium and a whole new way of making conservation or archiving. And as I said, these two examples, you see that you can form already at least 3 or 4 kind of narratives, or if it's not strictly narrative, but at least 3 ways of seeing data or artworks that a museum in a physical space cannot do. So maybe this is also why that at the end, we are not so interested in researching digital curation per se, but gradually turning to thinking about Net.art or how internet culture influenced the production of contemporary art in general. And also during this whole research of the historization of Net.art, we also find out that there's an important aspect of Net.art or online cultural production that is our body and physiology of it, because this internet culture makes us rethink what is our body and how the device affects us.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and also I think that it's this research and the experience of this year. I think it has also gave us a very different perspective on how to use the internet, or how to try to explore more and expand the possibilities of the internet. And in the same way, I think this is a area of research that institutions should also and are also approaching.
Yeah, so in order to form a deeper dialogue with our research on historization of Net.art, so we also invited artists to perform and present online in response to the questions that emerged during our research on Net.art. So we hope to create this discussion between our researchers and artists on an equal basis. So this is also why we especially chose artists who are conscious of their physical body in their previous working contests, so as to foster a comparison between online and offline, the virtual and the actual, or the digital and analog. So in response to the context of Net.art, we are also exploring the question on how the use of technology, more specifically the use of internet in the design of the interface, affect the artist's creative process. So this is also why now we turn from digital creating to Net.art, and then to this notion of embodied interface. So in this sense, we connect the history of Net.art to the contemporary art world and rethinking our physiology in the presence of art and the presence of our body. And I think also in Josephine Bosma's book that she also mentioned that this is one of an important aspect when researching Net.art. I quote, "Art needs essentially rewired art criticism and art theory in its shift away from the head to an embodied presence. Paradoxically, the internet also provokes a re-identification with our very own physiology. Online interactivity is at least as varied and complex as its unmediated variant, and also requires a specific sensitivity towards interpretation at times that can be utilized far beyond a museum's walls, and many layers of footways and trash." She's me. Yeah. So I think I will end here, that you can also, from our previous presentation till now, like know our thinking process, that we start from thinking of digital creating, then to Net.art, then to embodied interface. And we will also discuss this with like performance artists and with live performance to dig in this question about the relationship between body and internet culture and the specific technological device.
Yes, I would only add that for this very clear quote that our criticism should be rewired and move more from the theoretical or only head part of thinking to the embodied presence. I think that for our working process, it has been fundamental to have conversations with the artists and to have discussions with the artists and to be able to exchange while they were developing their artwork, and to exchange about previous artwork that they have done with devices, with technological devices, or only with live performance. So this position of the more in between position of the curator being able to join the artistic process, I think that it's also one of the ways in which we can relate more with the embodied presence. And now we, in this specific project, and because of the specific conditions, we add that this embodied presence is always mediated by devices. So it was it has been so far a very interesting experience to think again on all these aspects, and that we will, as Xian Yun said, continue discussing in the webinar with all the artists.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.